travel to another world, another time, in the age of wonder. The Dark Crystal.
Welcome to Stuff to Blow Your Mind from HowStuffWorks.com.
Hey, welcome to Stuff to Blow Your Mind. My name is Robert Lamb.
And I'm Joe McCormick, and we're back with another movie episode of Stuff to Blow Your Mind. I'm so excited about this one, Robert. What are we talking about today?
We're going to be talking about The Dark Crystal. Last month it was Highlander 2. I think a pretty objectively terrible film. Mm-hmm. But this time we're talking about a film that in my personal opinion, is indeed a great film, if not a perfect film.
In the words of a good friend of mine it is his favorite movie of all time, he posits it as the most magical movie ever made. And I think I agree. There is no more magical film. There's also no film I can think of that is a more pure fantasy than The Dark Crystal. There are a lot of fantasy movies, but The Dark Crystal is the most fully committed to a fantasy vision. It's a movie with no human beings in it.
Yeah, it is it's just a wonderful alien experience, but yet one that it shadows the natural world that we know. It shadows human mythologies and storytelling traditions, and it really leads to just an overall eloquent work. To remind anyone who hasn't seen it, or to sort of introduce you to it, because I've spoken to people who have not seen The Dark Crystal, and I have to tell them about it. I have to serve as an ambassador for this film. It came out in 1982, directed by Jim Henson and Frank Oz. Written
Kermit and Yoda.
Yeah, Kermit and Yoda. Written by David Odell and Jim Henson. And the world and creature designs were created by the artist Brian Froud, and then brought to life through Henson's Creature Shop, and just the vast effort of just an entire industry of people. There's a wonderful making of documentary that is generally included on most DVDs and Blu-rays that you'll find of The Dark Crystal. I highly recommend everyone watch that. In short, though, The Dark Crystal is a story of prophecy and reunification in a divided fantasy world. In a world that, like you said, is almost entirely rendered via puppets. I mean, you'll see rocks and maybe a few, see some grass, et cetera, that sort of thing.
But sometimes the grass is a puppet.
That's right. Sometimes the fauna, the flora, all of it is realized with puppetry, at least at some point in the film. The various creatures were designed through a superb fusion of that imaginative design from Brian Froud, inventive puppeteering and puppet design from Jim Henson's Creature Shop, and also the various professional physical performers such as dancers and still walkers. And you really can't overemphasize the importance of these three things coming together, because it's not enough that like the creature looks real, but does it move in a way that feels real, and then does it move in a way that doesn't feel like a human in a suit? Yeah,
so it is a beautifully designed film, and it's the kind of design that I love. You know, it was back before everything was CGI. It's puppets, it's models, it's sets, it's painted backgrounds. God, I love painted backgrounds in movies. Yeah. I would love to go back to that more often.
Yeah, it's a film that really could have only occurred in 1982. It came at the perfect time, because on one hand, like you said, if it had come out a little later, you would have had the early CGI coming into play.
Can you imagine that, like Mortal Kombat level CGI?
Yeah.
The Dark Crystal.
Or likewise, if it had been earlier, you might not have had the degree of technical know-how, or certainly the puppetry technology might not have been quite where it needed to be.
I would also say a thing that's remarkable about The Dark Crystal is the way that it seems to be a product of true collaborative evolution, because it seems like it's something that was originally kind of a rough concept and mythology dreamt up by Jim Henson, who joined forces with Brian Froud and Brian Froud's type of creature designs. Brian Froud illustrated like giants and fairies and things like that. And so his designs for creatures sort of fed back into Henson's ideas, about the story and the mythology. And then all this came together and got more definition when the performers came on board. It seems like a real ensemble creative project that was formed by a gradual accretion of mutations over many generations.
Yeah, and a big part of that was that there was money for this to happen.
Yeah,
and it's not a given that would have been the case.
That's Muppet money.
It is Muppet money. I believe part of the deal was when it was financed, it was all right, you can make the Dark Crystal, but you got to make some Muppet movies as well. We need them, and that we need to have the definite cash cows as well as this sort of long gamble at trying to cash in on the sort of franchise dominance that you saw just a few years earlier with Star Wars.
Yes, and also I think it was pretty clear through The Empire Strikes Back that people were looking at the Dark Crystal and saying, hey, Yoda the puppet, he's very popular in The Empire Strikes Back. We can make some puppet money with this Dark Crystal thing.
Now, arguably, it may not have reached the degree of financial achievement that everyone was hoping for at the time, but it has certainly become a beloved film, certainly one with a very strong cult following. And today, generally, you find if you ask somebody about the Dark Crystal, sometimes you may get some people who are like, oh, I remember seeing that as a kid. It was a little dark, et cetera. And it does have some darker, serious themes in it.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think I've ever met anybody who disliked the Dark Crystal, nor do I want to meet someone who disliked the Dark Crystal, because that's probably going to be a pretty big red flag for me that maybe we don't have a lot in common.
Yeah, if you don't like it, don't even bother writing in to tell us.
No, you can. You can tell us. I'd be interested to hear your reasons. Okay, but why are we talking about the Dark Crystal today? For starters, we do like to chat about films on the show here and there, and they often give us a means to discuss various scientific, philosophical, or psychological concepts that in some cases we might not otherwise cover. And with the Dark Crystal, well, I think there's a lot to be said about how it reflects aspects of our world and what we can see of planet Earth and human culture in the world of Thra.
Thra. So that's the planet they're on in the Dark Crystal. Or I don't know if they say I guess it's a planet. It's their world.
Yeah, it gets kind of tricky when you start trying to apply the scientific lens to a world that is to a pretty large degree realized through mythology. Mm-hmm. It's we will get into some astronomical concepts, but for the most part, the world of the Dark Crystal is a world of myth and magic.
Yeah, and also I will say, though I love the Dark Crystal and I'm a partisan of science, I will say it is not – I don't know if it is a strongly pro-science narrative, because you notice in the film, basically science and technology seems to only exist among the bad guys. And Well, no, that's not quite true. There's Aughra. Yeah, I'm overstepping.
Well, and then
I would say the Skeksis have a scientist, but the good mystics are more mystical in nature.
Yes, but then we have to consider where they came from. And we'll get back to that in a bit.
Okay.
But those are aliens. Those are that come to the world of Thra. We should talk for a little bit about the native inhabitants of this world.
Okay.
So first and foremost, the Dark Crystal is the story of Gelflings.
Yeah. It's a sort of hero's journey type narrative,
yeah.
a basic classic adventure narrative with a young Gelfling at the core of it.
Yeah, two of them actually. We start off with the male Gelfling, Jin, and then we meet a female Gelfling later on named Kira. And they are the last two, or seemingly the last two members of their species. Mm-hmm. And we come to learn that they were that their people were hunted to extinction by the Skeksis in ages past. And
I guess we'll have to explain the Skeksis.
We'll explain the Skeksis in a bit. But basically, their species is all but extinct. If we're to apply scientific understanding, I think we can safely say that they're extinct in the wild. Like the gene pool would be too shallow for them to repopulate the world. Mm-hmm. Though in a mythological sense, like the sort of Adam and Eve logic applies, and they could conceivably bring everything back.
Right.
But then also, more to the point, their culture is extinct. Like the only thing we see of original Gelfling culture we see in ruins, because Jin and Kira have each been raised by a different people. Jin has been raised by the mystics, the Uru, and then Kira is raised by the Podlings, these sort of potato people.
Yeah.
that live in huts and and
They
dance about and have a good time.
They do quite literally appear to have potatoes for heads.
Yes, they were modeled on potatoes.
Yeah, so they live sort of underground. It makes sense. They're potato humans, basically, little potato people.